For Eric J on Sports, I'm Eric J, and this is what I think. The year 2022 is coming to an end, so there's a lot of things we have learned and can learn from this past year, from this past calendar year, and from seasons past with regards to the world of sports. The first thing is, in New England, Bill Belichick, it's not possible to just grab any quarterback off the streets and throw him into your system and win Super Bowls. Tom Brady had an innate ability that other quarterbacks just do not have and that cannot be taught. You can't just grab any quarterback off the streets and expect that you're going to win Super Bowls. You've seen this now with Mac Jones, and you saw it before with Matt Castle and other people. These are good quarterbacks, very good quarterbacks, and you are a great coach, perhaps the greatest coach in the history of the NFL. But you cannot replace Tom Brady with Joe Smith and expect that Joe Smith is going to be as great as Tom Brady. There's a couple of things at play here. One, Tom Brady is great. Two, people wanted to play with Tom Brady. Three, since people don't know who Mac Jones is or what Mac Jones can do, free agents aren't lining up around the block to sign and play with the New England Patriots. You're having a good season. You made the playoffs last year with Mac Jones. But what you're going to find out over the long run is until you get a stud quarterback and until you can figure out a way to get other free agents to want to play with your stud quarterback, you are just going to be another team because none of these guys are or will be Tom Brady. And speaking of Tom Brady, you can't just go anywhere with any coach in any system and play with any talent and win Super Bowls. You got to Tampa Bay and you won a Super Bowl in your first season there, and that was impressive. But when you went to Tampa Bay, nearly everybody who was anybody showed up and wanted to play. Once those guys got their rings, they moved on to other areas in their life. Now you've got a regular team and a regular coach. You don't have Bill Belichick. You don't have Josh McDaniel. You don't have Patrick Graham. You don't have the coaches you had in New England. You just have a team. And because you just have a team, you're not winning at the clip that you had been winning in New England. Tampa Bay, the Buccaneers, are just another team. They are just one of 32. And as a result, you're finding out that as great as you are, as great as you think you could be, you can't just play with anybody, with any coach, in any system, in any stadium, in front of any fans, and win at the same level as you did with Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniel and the New England Patriots. Tampa Bay is good. Tampa Bay has 2 championships, one with you and one with John Gruden. But you aren't going to win too many more with just average talent, especially as close as you get to 45 years old and beyond. It is what it is, and you're not going to do it. And speaking of having a number of coaches, and speaking of playing with average talent, Raider fans need to stop blaming Derek Carr for the fact that the Raiders have not advanced beyond where they are now. The Raiders are an average team with great talent. The Raiders have one of the best running backs in the league. They have one of the best wide receivers in the league. They have one of the best defensive ends in the league, and they have one of the best linebackers in the league. And they have arguably the best kicker and best punter, which means they probably have a really good long snapper too. But you have to stop blaming Derek Carr for the team's problems, because Derek Carr has been with the Raiders for 9 years. And Derek Carr has played under 6 head coaches, which means only about 2 or 3 of those guys actually got a second season with Derek Carr. John Gruden had 3 seasons, I think 4 seasons. Jack Del Rio got a couple of seasons, which means through most of the years that Derek Carr has been with the Raiders, he had a season with a coach, and then as soon as the season was over, he had another season with another coach. Think about it this way. Tom Brady was with the Patriots for 20 years. He had one coach, Bill Belichick. He won 6 Super Bowls and went to the Super Bowl 9 times. Peyton Manning played for 2 different franchises. He had 2 different coaches. He won Super Bowls. He had a Hall of Fame career. He set records. Life was wonderful. Drew Brees played for 2 franchises, but he had 2 coaches. He set records, had a Hall of Fame career, went to the Super Bowl, won it, had a great life. Derek Carr has had 6 coaches in 9 seasons. And there's a very good chance that next season, if he's a Raider again, he'll have another new head coach because the Raiders are a poorly run organization. Now, what makes them a poorly run organization is the fact that people had been talking about that they had not been to the playoffs since the Super Bowl run where John Gruden was the head coach of the other guys and knew all of the Raiders' plays and beat the snot out of the Raiders in the Super Bowl. They haven't been back to the playoffs since. Well, under Derek Carr, the Raiders have been to the playoffs twice. And each time the Raiders made it to the playoffs, as soon as the Raiders were eliminated in the offseason, Mark Davis, the owner, son of Al Davis, fired the coach. Jack Del Rio was let go as soon as the Raiders won the Super Bowl so they could sign John Gruden. And Rich Bisaccia was let go after rallying the team through to an inexplicable winning streak and getting into the playoffs and playing the Cincinnati Bengals even until the last couple of minutes, and the Bengals ended up going all the way to the Super Bowl, which means the only team that could beat the Bengals that year was the eventual Super Bowl champion. And Rich Bisaccia, instead of going from interim head coach to head coach, was fired so that the Raiders could sign Josh McDaniel. And under Josh McDaniel, the Raiders have been a mysterious anomaly where they win games they're supposed to lose and then lose games they were winning outright. What other team has blown 4 double-figure leads in the same season? It's a poorly run organization, but we keep wanting to blame Derek Carr. It's not Derek Carr's fault. He's a Pro Bowl quarterback. If he had a coach and a system for more than one season, we would see that. But after 9 years, it's starting to get to the backside of his career, so it's probably not going to happen. And speaking of poorly run organizations, the Los Angeles Lakers are not going to win a championship in the foreseeable future as long as they continue to operate the way they do. They won a championship in 2020 in the bubble, and I always equate the 2020 championship to one similar to the 1999 NBA championship after the strike year, when I said at the time that the two most adult teams would probably play in the NBA Finals. And it turns out that the teams with the most 4-year college graduates, the San Antonio Spurs and the New York Knicks, were the teams that ended up in the finals. And in 2020, there were a lot of guys that didn't play. There were a lot of guys who got COVID and couldn't play. There were a lot of guys who were injured. There were a lot of guys who didn't want to play. There was just a lot going on that year. But somebody had to win a championship, and it turned out that that was the one season that Anthony Davis was healthy and able to play, and they won a championship. But since then, we've seen that the Lakers just want to sign names, friends of LeBron, clients of LeBron's agent, and just pack the roster with whoever, whatever, wherever, when everybody who watches NBA basketball knows that LeBron James needs shooters. LeBron James needs guys who are not as good as Steph Curry, but maybe at least as good as Seth Curry. They need guys who can hit threes on command, at will, guarded or unguarded, so LeBron can penetrate the paint, pass out to a shooter, get a shot, and then move on to the rest of the game. They haven't signed that. They haven't done that. They've brought in this guy and that guy and this guy and that guy. They brought in guys like Russell Westbrook who can't shoot, and they've brought in guys like Kendrick Nunn and Dennis Schroeder who are decent shooters but aren't great shooters. And they brought in Patrick Beverley just to play defense because they said, okay, maybe he can make a 3 or 2. But the biggest issue that the Lakers have had is the fact that they want to keep running the organization like it's a family business. If you have been a part of the Lakers organization at some point, at any point in your career, there's a good chance you're going to be the head coach at some point. Because that's what they do. Either you are a LeBron James pick, like Mike Brown, or you're a former player, a former coach, a former something else, like Darvin Ham or Byron Scott. You're going to be the coach of the Lakers if you've worked for the Lakers at some point. It's a poorly run organization, and as long as they continue to run the organization the way that they do, they will not win another championship. They're paying too much money for LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Russell Westbrook to be able to sign anybody else. there's a good chance that nobody else wants to be there. And as long as it's a family business and not a business, they won't win another championship. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving was a bad marriage from the start. It didn't matter whether James Harden was the third guy, or Ben Simmons is the third guy, or Blake Griffin is the third guy, or DeAndre Jordan is the third guy, or LaMarcus Aldridge. It didn't matter who that other guy was or was going to be. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving was a bad marriage. Kevin Durant's a really sensitive guy. You say something about Kevin Durant and he feels the need to attack. He can't just let things go. Kevin Durant, if anyone mentions his name in the press, he feels like he has to respond. One of the greatest players to ever play the game, but he cannot separate basketball and his emotions. Kyrie Irving is the exact opposite. Kyrie Irving is a guy who says things, does things, marches to the beat of his own drummer, as people like to say. But his drummer gets in the way of him being on the court. But the fact of the matter is this. Kyrie Irving is Robin. Kevin Durant is Batman, but Kevin Durant doesn't want to be in the spotlight. Kevin Durant was perfectly content to go to the Warriors to be one of the Warriors. The Warriors surrendered the team to Kevin Durant. He won a couple of championships, and then he left so he could get back into the spotlight. He went to Brooklyn thinking that Kyrie Irving would be one. Kyrie Irving went to Brooklyn thinking that he would be one. Thinking that Durant would be one. That was a bad marriage from the start. They're two great players, but like a lot of teams are finding out, the NBA is not the all-star game. Teams actually play defense during the season. Teams actually scheme for you during the season. So you can't just grab names and put together a team and expect that it's going to work. Certain NBA superstars need to learn that just because you're an NBA superstar doesn't mean people want to play with you. Trae Young, DeMar DeRozan, just because you're great, and they are great, and there are other players who fit into this category also, but just because you're great doesn't mean other players want to play with you. The NBA, just like any other sports organization, is a brotherhood. You can't just be a bunch of guys that they throw together. This is what we're finding out with the Lakers, and this is what we found out with the Brooklyn Nets. You can't just be a bunch of guys that they throw together. The Los Angeles Clippers have played the name game and put together a bunch of guys, but they're not winning at the rate they're supposed to. Even with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and John Wall, they're not winning the way they're supposed to. You can't just throw guys together. It has to be a brotherhood. Magic Johnson, AC Green, Byron Scott, Michael Cooper were friends. They hung out together all the time. James Worthy hung out with him all the time. Larry Bird was an enigma, but Robert Parrish and Kevin McHale and Danny Ainge and Greg Kite and those guys hung out together. They liked each other. On the court, off the court, didn't matter. You can't just throw a guy into a situation, throw some guys around him and say, go play basketball. This ain't the All-Star game. In the All-Star game, you can get away with that. In the season, you cannot. And there are some guys that people just don't want to play with. There are some guys that rub organizations the wrong way. And they have to learn that the league and the sport is bigger than their talent. And until they figure that out, they're going to always be on the trade block. They're going to always be in the news for the wrong reasons. Hockey fans, sports media, ESPN, Fox Sports, CBS Sports, YouTube, Amazon, whoever needs to figure out that Alex Ovechkin is legit. Alex Ovechkin just passed Gordie Howe for second most goals scored in the NHL. And he did it in fewer games than Gordie Howe played. Same thing with Wayne Gretzky. They passed Gordie Howe in fewer games. But hear this. Alex Ovechkin averages more goals per game than Gretzky. Alex Ovechkin has more 50-goal seasons than Gretzky. Alex Ovechkin, if he plays the rest of this season and one more season, will pass Wayne Gretzky for career goals scored because he scores more goals per game than Gretz. If he plays this season, finishes this season healthy, plays a full next season healthy, he will pass Gretz and will do it in fewer games. Now, Gretzky's career scoring mark is not in jeopardy because Alex Ovechkin is not near the passer or the assist man that Gretzky was. But as far as career goals scored, Alex Ovechkin will be the first and only NHL player to score 900. Gretzky finished with 892. Ovechkin will finish with 900. Hear me on that. Go to the bank on it. As long as he finishes this season healthy, plays next season healthy, he will get to 900 goals. You heard it here first. U.S. men's soccer team had a decent run in the World Cup. But the U.S. men's soccer team will never win the World Cup unless they get their heads out of the sand and hire some of the women who are coaching the U.S. women's soccer team. The U.S. women's World Cup soccer team wins the World Cup practically every time they enter it. The U.S. men's soccer team barely even qualifies for the World Cup. So what does that mean? Does that mean that there's more women's soccer talent than there is men's soccer talent? Or does it mean that the U.S. women's soccer team is better run than the men's soccer team? Or could it just possibly be that the women's soccer team has better coaching than the men's soccer team? You see, there's men's professional soccer. There is not women's professional soccer. If there is, I haven't heard of it. The women gear up for the World Cup, and their coaches understand the World Cup. If I were running the U.S. men's soccer team, I would grab one or two of the assistants from the U.S. women's soccer team, make them head coach of the men, and let the men be coached by the women who coached championships for the women. And let's see if the men can become better. Because think about it. We've got women coaches in the NBA. Becky Hammon was an assistant coach with the San Antonio Spurs. There are women coaching in the NFL. There will soon be women coaching in Major League Baseball. The U.S. women's soccer team coaches are champions. The U.S. men's soccer team can barely make it into the World Cup year after year. Hire some of the women who are coaching the women and have them coach the men and see if it makes a difference. In Major League Baseball, spending the most money doesn't guarantee you a championship. The Dodgers have gone to the World Series 3 or 4 times in the last 5 years and have won one. But they keep spending the most money, signing the best players, the same way the New York Yankees used to do for all these years, and they couldn't win championships. You have to get the right players, and those right players have to gel together at the right time. Through all the years of Don Mattingly, the Yankees won no championships. Once Derek Jeter showed up, the Yankees were able to win championships because Jeter was a championship caliber player, not just a great player. The Dodgers keep signing whoever, whenever, wherever, for how much ever, and it's not working. You're just fielding a great team, but you're not winning championships. Somehow we keep seeing the Houston Astros in the championship, and they don't have an all-star team. They got a couple of great players. They got Jose Altuve, who was a championship caliber player. And speaking of championship caliber players, Artie Moreno. You need to figure out a way to make your team, the Angels, a winner, or Shohei Ohtani will be wearing somebody else's colors very, very soon. Odell Beckham. Odell Beckham is not signed with anybody. Odell Beckham is waiting for some team to have a dearth of wide receivers so that he can sign. He said that he probably only wants to go back to his original New York Giants or back to the other team that he played for a while, the Dallas Cowboys. And that's fine. But they don't need the help at wide receiver. There's a bunch of other teams that had needed help at wide receiver. But Odell, there's a reason you're not signed with anybody. Same reason Dwight Howard didn't get signed with anybody after last season. There's a reason you're not signed. I'm not going to tell you what that reason is. I'll let you figure that out. There's a reason you're not signed with anybody. And it's no accident. NCAA understand that your football players and your basketball players are not student athletes. Your football players and your basketball players are not student athletes. Your baseball players might be, your women's basketball players might be, your hockey players, your field hockey players, your lacrosse players, your track stars, your swimmers, your golfers, your water polo folks. All of those people might be student athletes. They might be there for the long haul trying to get their degree, and they chose the schools that they chose because they wanted to get a 4-year degree from that school and a chance to play at the highest level of whatever their sport is. But your football players and your basketball players are not student athletes. Your basketball players only have to be there one season, which means they're probably not even going to class because the basketball season starts right after the school year starts and it ends just before the school year ends. And they're going to dump after that first season and get an agent and try to sign with the NBA. So they're probably not even going to class. And as far as your football players go, you guys created the monster and now you're trying to put the genie back in the bottle. Enough cliches in one thought. You told football players in Division I football, if you're not happy where you are, you can transfer. There is a player who went to USC, got hurt. Caleb Williams showed up, became a stud, so this kid transferred. This kid is now in his 4th college year, and he's about to start for Rice, his 4th college. He was with a new college every single year he was in school. Anybody who's ever gone to college knows that classes sometimes don't transfer. So is this kid actually caring about going to college, caring about classwork, caring about anything else other than the fact that he wants to get to the NFL and play at the highest level? He goes to college, signs with the college, is not happy with the situation, and he transfers to a new college. And he's done this now 3 times and has signed with 4 different colleges in 4 seasons. Used to be if you transferred, you had to sit out a year. So guys could only transfer once or twice because you only had 4 years of eligibility, but you could only redshirt twice. Now you can transfer anytime you want to. Just ask Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders was a good coach and was in a good situation, decided to leave Jackson State to go to Colorado. And now he's telling all of his players, all my Jackson State guys come to Colorado, all you Colorado guys go somewhere else. They're not student athletes anymore. They're commodities. They can now be paid and they can now do what they want to do. NCAA football is a business. It's not about student athletes anymore. And finally, if you're famous, sports or otherwise, come to realize that your social media, your public persona, what you say on TV, and what you do out in public is important, matters, and will come back to haunt you if it goes south. Guys like Kyrie Irving and Willie McGinnis are finding out that what they say and what they do can be detrimental if you're not paying attention to what you say and what you do. So just know that if you're famous, the things you say, the things you do, the people you hang out with, the places you go, the people you see, can come back to haunt you and can negatively affect your career. So just be careful, be smart, make your life make sense, because kids still look up to you no matter how big a Nimrod you are in public, in private, or in print on social media. Kids still look up to you, and it matters what you do because they're going to do what you do because they still look up to you. Just like everybody wanted to be like Mike in the 80s and 90s, now people want to be like insert name here. Remember to like and share this video and subscribe to this channel, and visit my website at the URL in the description below, and follow me on Facebook at Eric J on Sports 1 and on Instagram and Twitter at Eric J on Sports. And for Eric J on Sports, I'm Eric J, and this is what I think.